Hi all, this is Ryan and this is lesson 13 of working with JavaScript. In this lesson we'll be learning about objects. So we'll link to our external JavaScript file. Just want to take some notes with regard to what is an object. An object consists of properties as well as methods. So what is a property? A property is an attribute or characteristic of a specific object. I like to think of it as a noun. And a method is something that you can do. So it's more like a verb. It's an action. So we could write our very own object. And we do this by creating a function that constructs the object. So normally an object begins with a capital letter. This is just a convention in JavaScript. It doesn't have to, but it's easier then to spot the difference between a regular function and a constructor for an object. So I'm creating an object called a car. And this object's going to have various properties or nouns, and it's also going to have various methods or verbs. So I'm going to create some properties. So we do this by just passing some variables to the constructor. I'll have a make of my car, a model of my car, and a color of my car. So within the constructor of the object, I can use a property called this, a very special word in JavaScript. It's a reserved word. It's used within the language of JavaScript. And it refers to the current object, whatever that may be. Because remember, this concept of working with objects is that you can make lots of children. You can replicate yourself over and over again. In this world we know there are many cars, but they all have the same basic principles. They have wheels, they have a steering wheel that you can use to steer the vehicle with, they have doors, you can open the door and get into the car. You can accelerate the vehicle and so on. So there are various things that always remain the same, whether you're driving a BMW or you're driving a Toyota. They still have wheels, they still have doors and so on. Okay, so the word this is referring to the specific instance of this car. So it might be your car, it might be my car. So let's say this.make is equal to make, this.model is equal to model, and this.color is equal to color. If you are familiar with other programming languages and object orientation in other programming languages, you would probably have heard of the concept of a class. In JavaScript there's no such thing as a class. It's prototype based, so an object will still have properties and methods, but we don't use a class to define it. If we want to define some kind of method, a method, remember, is kind of like a function within an object. So it's a verb, it's an action. We could do something like this. We could say this.changeColor is equal to function. I'm going to create an anonymous function. And how do we change the color? We just say this.color is equal to, I'm going to have to send it a new color. And I'll say this.color is equal to new color. And there's an example of a method. So this is a method. And these three are all properties. So that's the constructor to create a brand new car. How do we go about actually using this object now? So we could start by defining a object variable. So I'm going to call it my car. And we're going to say new, and then we'll say car. And then I'm going to define specific properties related to my car. So I need to send it a make of the car, the model of the car, and the color of the car. I could then also create another car for your car. Maybe a BMW X5, green BMW X5. Okay, so when you see the word new, then you should understand that you're creating a child of that parent object. So it's going to call the constructor, and it's going to make your very own custom car. It's still going to have 4 wheels and 4 doors and so on, but the make, model and color are going to be different between my car and your car. So if I want to output any of the properties of one of these objects, I could just say block.innerHTML, and I could say something like your car is a, and then I'll say my car, so your car dot make space your car dot model. So your car is a BMW X5. Then I could say my car is a my car dot make. My car is a Toyota. So you always name the object first with a full stop in between, and then either the property or a method of that object. So if I wanted to change the color of my car, I could say my car dot change color, and you can see immediately I'm using round brackets, and this is how you know that you're working with a method of an object as opposed to a property of an object. Remember, when we work with the property of an object, we simply put object.property. When we're working with a method of an object, in other words a verb or doing word, we say object.method with the round brackets. The round brackets tell you immediately that you're working with an object, with a method. So I'm going to change my color to pink. And why don't we change your color as well while we're about it. I'm going to change your BMW to a blue BMW. Except I shouldn't say my car, I should say your car, because it's specific to your car. And let's display the colors into our panel. My color car is my car dot color. Your color car is your car dot color. Okay, so my color car is pink, your color car is blue. So there's an example of how to create your very own object with properties as well as with methods. You can have as many properties as you want, and you can have as many methods as you want. The advantage of using objects is that you can define patterns within the parent, and every time you create a new child, those children would work the same way. You can customize it by just giving it different properties. Another way that you can create an object in JavaScript is by using the Json notation. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JavaScript Object Notation. I'll give you an example. So you could say, for example, my car is equal to curly brackets, close curly brackets, semicolon. And you could say the make of my car, colon, is a Toyota, comma, the model, Avanza, and the color, white. So it's just another way of creating an object using JavaScript object notation. So then if I want to display some of the properties, I could say my car is a my car.color, my car dot make. So my car is a white Toyota. So when we work with the object, we work with it in the same way as before. Object name dot property or object name dot property. But defining the object, just slightly different way of doing it, using curly brackets. Property names on the left hand side with colons, and then the values on the right hand side. We can also use one of the built-in browser objects. So let's maybe look at the built-in, one example of the built-in string object. So we could create a string This is actually doing the same thing as name is equal to new string. So there's already a built-in browser object called string, and then we could say something like that. So those two lines are the same. It's just obviously easier just to create a simple variable and give it a value. It has the same effect as creating a child object, a child string object. So one of the characteristics or properties of a built-in browser string object is that it has a length property. So therefore I could go block.innerHTML equals name.length. It's normally string.length, but in this case, because I've made a child called name, just child of the string object, because the parent string object had a length property, the child also has a length property. So there are 4 characters inside that particular string. One example of a method of the built-in string object is to convert it to uppercase. So I could say block.innerHTML is equal to name.toUppercase. See what that looks like. Notice the round brackets, meaning that it's a method. And so it outputs my name in capital letters. So there's an example of using a built-in object that's built into JavaScript already. You don't have to write the object yourself, it's already built into the browser. And as we go through the course, we'll come across many built-in objects. And that ends our lesson in working with JavaScript objects.